Welcome back, Whiskey Noobs. Let's talk about whether or not you should be drinking, how much you should be drinking, my personal philosophy on drinking a little bit. I'm not a doctor, but I did do some research, and I'm going to talk about it a little bit in this episode, so let's do that. But before we get started, the most important announcement, if you're watching this on YouTube, there is not a more important thing that I'm going to say in this episode, okay? This podcast is moving to a different YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to it yet, please do so. This will be the last episode posted to the @whiskey_noobs YouTube channel. That YouTube channel is going to still be a thing, but it's not going to be for podcasting because the podcast is such a different format. So the whole podcast is moving to the @whiskey_noobs podcast YouTube channel. I put it in the description of the last few episodes. Please go check that out and it's also going to be in the description of every YouTube video I make moving forward. So this channel, it depends. If you're already watching this on the new channel, then congratulations, you did it, and you're probably skipping this message anyways. But if you're watching this on the @whiskey_noobs channel, where it has been for the past couple years, that channel is going to move to only shorts and long-form YouTube videos. The podcast, and hopefully eventually podcast clips in the form of shorts, podcast segments in the form of YouTube videos, things like that, is all going to live on its own channel because it's two separate mediums and it's too confusing when I have it all on one channel to sift through all that information. So that is going to live on its own YouTube channel, which is @whiskey_noobs podcast. Please make sure you're subscribed to that. Okay. Sorry that I had to take so long with that announcement, but this is the last podcast episode that's going to be posted to the old channel. So very important to talk about. Now, speaking of very important to talk about, nice segue, Chris. Let's talk about drinking alcohol. This episode is going to be about just drinking culture in general. It is no secret to anyone, I don't think, that the newer generations, younger people, are drinking less than previous generations. And I think in general, that's probably a great thing. I think drinking less is a good thing, and there's no doubt that it's having a negative impact on some alcohol producers, and that's going to happen. The market's going to grow and it's going to shrink. That's just going to be the case. But I want to talk about it because I think there's a perspective that not a lot of people are getting, and I want to talk about how we might be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think we are getting rid of drinking. And when I say we, I mean like as a society. Drinking is decreasing, which in general is good because it's decreasing for our health. And people are saying, I don't want to put this in my body if it's going to hurt me. And I think that is great. But I think we are also throwing out a little bit of baby with a lot of bathwater in that we are getting rid of good things as well. There's good aspects to drinking and what it brings about in society that I think we're getting rid of. And I'm actually going to back that up with some statistics. So I'm going to talk about kind of the pros and the cons from my perspective and from what I'm seeing. And then I'm going to talk about statistics that are in favor of alcohol and against alcohol because there's a little bit of both. And that's just the case. So I will be citing my sources down in the description below. This is one of those where I actually am like looking at actual genuine sources and I want to make sure that they're getting the credit. So I'm going to do my best to cite those verbally and then also put them in the description so that you can find them. Now I want to be very, very, very careful with this topic. If you don't know me, it has long been a goal of mine to sort of preach healthy consumption. And when I say healthy, I should say moderated consumption, having things in moderation, specifically making sure you're not binge drinking or drinking every single day. That has been something that I've talked about a lot in the past, and I probably haven't talked about enough lately, but that is something that's important to me. You'll notice that I don't really advertise for anyone that is supporting the idea of binge drinking. I've had really cool companies reach out to me, and I haven't worked with them because I thought this, in my opinion, this pushes people more towards the idea that it's okay to binge drink and it's okay to use alcohol as a little bit of a crutch and those sorts of things. So I want to be really careful with how I handle this topic, and I'm going to try to speak very carefully throughout this episode. And I want to say, if you have a problem with drinking, if anybody you know has a problem with drinking, that The things I'm going to say about moderation and about it being okay to have certain amounts of alcohol, I would say don't apply to you. If you know that you're the type of person that if you have a couple, you're going to have a lot more than a couple, then those don't apply. So everything I'm saying and everything I'm going to talk about, especially the studies and things, I am directing towards an audience that feels they can control their drinking and has a healthy relationship with alcohol. And what is a healthy relationship? I would say if it's not a crutch, if you're not using it every single day, or you're not using it more often than you would want to. If you're like, I should drink less, then that's probably not a healthy relationship to alcohol. If you're like, I am drinking the exact amount that I probably should be, then you have a healthy relationship with alcohol. So that I just want to put that all out there and say I'm not encouraging anyone with a previous history of alcoholism or anything like that to drink. That is not what I'm doing. I am also not a doctor. I am not a professional in the realm of alcohol abuse, substance abuse, anything like that. And I am not claiming to be. I am coming at this from the perspective of an enthusiast. And so I'm speaking to the other enthusiasts who are like, where should I find the line? What are the pros and the cons? What are the upsides and the downsides? That's what I'm here to talk about. I'm not a doctor, okay? Just want to put all that. None of this is medical advice, nothing like that. Want to put all that right there in the beginning because, once again, this is a sensitive topic and it's important that I'm careful with the way that I approach it. And I'm really, really trying to be careful with the way that I approach it. So let's start by talking about what alcohol should not be. Alcohol should not be an escape. I don't think alcohol is something that you use. We love to joke about taking the edge off, and I don't think it's something you should use to take the edge off. Now, there's a couple ways you can look at this. So you could look at it as I'm using alcohol to take the edge off in that I had a stressful week and now it's the weekend and my wife and I are having a date night and we're going to get a couple drinks and we're just going to unwind a little bit. That I would say is not really an escape. So the way I typically look at a lot of things is like through dopamine and the dopamine that it gives you. Dopamine is what makes you enjoy things a lot of the time. To really, really simplify a lot of science, dopamine is like the reaction your brain has that says, hey, I like this thing. And so the way I look at using alcohol in a situation like I just described is I am using it not as an escape. I'm using it to get a little bit of dopamine as a reward for the hard week that I had. As, I recognize what I am putting into my body and my wife and I just want to loosen up a little bit and have a good night. That I don't think is an escape. Now, if you're using it the other way to quote unquote take the edge off, which is life has been really hard lately and I don't feel like thinking about it and I just want to feel better. That is bad. That is not what alcohol is meant to be. And that I would consider abusive. Once again, I'm not a professional, but I'm just speaking from the hobby perspective and from situations that I've found myself in. If you're using alcohol as, I don't want to think about other stuff right now, and I just want to numb things a little bit, not a good use of alcohol. So alcohol should not be an escape. And that is kind of what I mean when I say escape. It's also not meant to be the only way to be social. So I'm going to talk about some of the social benefits of alcohol, and there's even studies that back up the benefits of alcohol in a social environment. But it's not the only way to be social. So if you find yourself with crippling social anxiety and you have to drink or be drunk every time you hang out with people, that is not the proper use of alcohol. Alcohol is a great social lubricant, and we're going to talk about that. And I would even go as far as to say, this is real specific to Chris. So, take this with a grain of salt. But like, if it helps you to loosen up in a situation where you can't, maybe it's okay. But maybe it's not if it becomes a habit that you have to do every single time. And I think that's the key with most of this is moderation and habituation. I don't know if habituation is the right word. But if it is becoming a habit that you feel the need to do, that is where it becomes a problem, in my personal opinion. But anyways, I don't want to stay too long on this topic because, once again, I'm not a professional, and you should talk to a professional about any of this if you're having concerns, or even if you're not having concerns, but you're just like, well, I drink every night, but it's fine. But It shouldn't be the only way to be social. It shouldn't be a crutch. It shouldn't be a thing that we need, right? Alcohol is something we should have a healthy relationship with. So if you're having crippling social anxiety and you're having trouble talking to people and things like that, there's work that should be done under the surface to help with that, and not just a Band-Aid of alcohol. Alcohol is a Band-Aid, and if you're having crippling social anxiety and you can't hang out with people without alcohol, you need stitches. You don't need a Band-Aid, and that's where maybe you should be talking to somebody. It's also not meant to be an everyday thing. And I'm going to walk through some studies that say it should be way less than an everyday thing. So it's not meant to be a thing we're consuming nonstop. And if you have trouble with the idea of dry January, for example, if you find yourself like, I could never do dry January. That's great for some people. I couldn't do it. That is probably a sign that it would do the most for you. So I think if you aren't able to fast from alcohol for a while, if the idea of even doing a dry week scares you right now, then you probably need to pump the brakes on alcohol a little bit. This is not meant to get preachy, and the way I wrote it out was not preachy, and I'm realizing now it seems a little preachy, so I apologize for that. The main idea, after we get through these last couple of points, is to talk about what I think is the proper use of alcohol, which is a much more fun topic. So let me finish these last couple. So it also should not be draining your bank account. Alcohol should not be the big thing that is your biggest expense. And this goes for people who, by the way, don't have a chemical dependence on alcohol, don't find themselves drinking it regularly or every day or anything like that, but are collectors and are spending way too much money. If it's creating a financial strain in your life, especially if you're married and it's putting a strain in your marriage, alcohol is not meant to do that. So you might not be chemically addicted to it, but you might be mentally addicted to it. You might be mentally addicted to the shopaholism, the impulsive buying of it. So keep that in mind as well. That's kind of another aspect of it, especially specific to whiskey, that is important. So if any of those things are the case, if anything that I just mentioned sounds like you, I highly recommend you take a break and you see how it makes you feel. And if taking a break is terrifying for you, and you are like, I don't think I ever could, then I highly recommend you get help. Or if it's a severe case, I highly recommend that you get some help. And so I hope that wasn't too raw or too real, but I needed to preface what I'm about to say with all of that, because that is so important. And what I'm about to say and what I'm about to talk about, where I personally find balance, and there's the studies that I've seen online, it's all with the grain of salt that you don't have an existing issue and that none of the qualifiers I just talked about seem to apply to you. So this episode's making me a little more uncomfortable than I thought I was going to when I was writing it, because I don't want anybody to think that I'm a medical professional. I'm just trying to talk. I'm trying to speak to the culture from the way I see alcohol being used and the way that I personally have found appropriate, especially as a Christian. I get that question a lot. As a Christian, where do you draw the line with alcohol? I draw the line at drunkenness. I think the Bible makes it pretty clear that plenty of people are seen as drinking and seen in a great light, seen in a good light. Jesus' first miracle was to turn water into wine at a wedding. And I think it's all seen in a great light. But I think it is a problem, and it's shown as a problem in the Bible when it's used to the point of drunkenness and when it becomes a thing that is making you give up your higher order level of thinking is kind of where I tend to draw the line. So here are things that alcohol is and alcohol can be. And I think if you have a healthy relationship with alcohol, makes it fun and makes it the thing that we all enjoy so much and why you guys are probably here and listening to this podcast. I think alcohol brings people together. And I think this is really, really underrated. This, I would say, when I say we're throwing the baby out with the bathwater with all this sobriety movement, I think this is the baby that's getting thrown out with the bathwater. Because is it valid to say you should be able to have fun without alcohol and you should be able to have friends without alcohol and you shouldn't need alcohol in order to bring people together? Sure, that's absolutely valid. But that's not the same thing as saying, in a practical sense, in a normal world, everyone's going to do that, right? So I think we are losing some culture because in an ideal world, should we be able to all go hang out at a local place and talk to each other and have great conversations without alcohol? Yes, in an ideal world, we should have that. But let's be practical for a minute. As alcohol usage is decreasing, so are those things I just described. So are people coming together in a central place and talking and hanging out. And whiskey is just one of the greatest examples of this, because whiskey culture is generally, come over to my house and let's try a couple of these. I want you to come try this. I want you to try a new whiskey that I bought. Let's have a bottle share. Let's all meet up. Whiskey culture is really one of the last holdouts against that. I actually made a video about that the other day, like a short form Instagram video, because whiskey culture is great for that. And so I don't want to lose that. And I think a great example of that is Ireland. Okay. So I just recently went over to Ireland this past summer. Some of you guys might know that from previous episodes. And I'm not trying to be that guy who's like, well, I went to Europe and they do this differently. But then after Ireland, I found some things online of people even talking about it, probably because I was watching Ireland videos. But Ireland has this really great social culture where everybody goes to the pub. And one of the key things that was in one of the videos that came up about it, I'll never be able to find it again, so I apologize, I can't give you credit, whoever it is that made that video, was in Ireland, they're drinking very slowly. So I think it might have been an Irish person that came to the US and was like, yeah, I was really confused by the fact that people are taking shots and just trying to get drunk, because that's not what drinking culture is in Ireland. Drinking culture in Ireland is, we're drinking beer that's not very strong, and we're just sipping on it all night and talking and socializing and being present. And I thought that was just awesome, because that is such a good perspective on what the drinking culture, I think, should be. Drinking should not be about getting drunk. It should not be about getting that buzz. It should be about just sipping on something, talking to somebody, and kind of relaxing and having good conversations. And in Ireland, it usually means singing and dancing too, which we need to bring that to the United States, by the way. That is awesome culture. But that is a big part of it. And so I don't want us to get rid of that part. And I think we are. Like, I think statistics are really showing that, like, the younger generations are just staying at home and sitting by themselves, and thus not drinking at bars and things. So, like, good for your health. You're not drinking. But you know what's bad for your health is sitting at home and doom scrolling all night. That's also not good for your health. We're not weighing all these different things that are actually bad for us. And that's what one of these studies actually looks at that we're going to talk about. But it brings people together, whether it's in a bottle share, whether it's in a bar, because think about this. If nobody's drinking, bars don't exist anymore. And bars, pubs, etc., are traditionally the places that people go to socialize. Like, back in the day, especially when bar culture was a little stronger in the United States, what did you tell somebody who was still single and was like, I'm having trouble finding anybody? Go to a bar and start talking to people and try to get to know some people at the bar. Like, that was genuinely a thing. But now we date online, and so we don't go to bars anymore. And I think we're missing something there. I really do. I also think that alcohol, like I said, it brings people together. It's a great excuse to talk to somebody without doing anything else distracting. And what I mean by that is, if you don't have alcohol, what is the invite? Is it board game night? Is it karaoke night? Is it video game night? Because any of those things that I just mentioned aren't going to leave a lot of wiggle room for actually talking and having real conversations. I think one of the real beauties of moderate, responsible consumption of alcohol is, if you invite somebody over to share some alcohol, it's not about the alcohol most of the time. What you're actually going to end up talking about is each other and your life and what's going on and what's important to you and what's not important to you, and victories you had this week and losses that you had this week. That's what ends up happening. And that, I think, is like the golden nugget at the center of what we're losing. So, we're losing bars because they can't afford to operate if you're not actually buying alcohol from them. If you buy soda and you drink soda all night, I hate to tell you this, they're not going to be able to stay in business, most likely. Also, we're losing hangouts that involve nothing other than hanging out. We're missing that. And a great proxy for this, is that the word? A great substitute for this is just having dinner with people. Absolutely. Just breaking bread and enjoying a meal. But after the meal is over, what are you going to do? Are you going to sit around and continue to talk? If so, great. If not, that's what cocktail hour is for. That's what we're sitting around. Let me get you a drink. What do you want? Let me mix you something up and let's have a conversation. We're losing that. We are losing that badly. And I see this all the time. Like, in my own life, in the lives of people around me, I can't invite somebody to come over and just talk most of the time. I think cigars, by the way, are phenomenal for this as well. But it's harder to find somebody who likes cigars. It's a lot easier to find people who like to have a drink or two. But it's really hard to invite somebody over and not have a reason, but be like, let's just, you want to come over and talk? Like, what does that sound like? Like, it's just weird, right? And maybe we need to get past that weirdness. Like, maybe in an ideal world, we do just say that. But once again, I'm talking about being practical. And the practical thing to say is, why don't you guys come over for some drinks? Let's hang out. Or some dinner and drinks. Let's hang out and talk. And we're losing that as a culture. And I like I said, I just see it everywhere. Or why don't we go to a bar? That's like an even easier invite because it's not at your house. Nobody has to host. The pressure is off. We're just going to a public place and we're just going to hang out. And that's something that I think Ireland does really well and that the U.S. does not do very well. And I think the underlying principle that I want to steal from Ireland in this case, the Irish culture, is each of those things I just mentioned are best served if you're drinking slowly and you're not getting overly buzzed or intoxicated. And alcohol, the next thing I want to say is it's a good social lubricant, but it's only a good social lubricant in moderation. So alcohol is a great social lubricant in that it can lower our filters a little bit, and we can let ourselves be a little bit more vulnerable around our friends and say things we might not normally say. Just a little bit, okay? Just a hair. And in that case, like when you hit that perfect stride, it really helps conversation. It really helps you bond. I know some of the best memories I have with friends are where we all got to just that perfect point where nobody's making a fool of themselves. Nobody is what I would consider drunk at all, but we're all just having great conversation. We hit a groove. It's kind of like those conversations you used to have in elementary school when you would stay up until you were basically buzzed off tiredness, off sleep deprivation, and then you'd have these phenomenal conversations. If you ever had that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like that. And here's the thing, and here's the beauty of it, and here's where I find a really nice line in the sand, especially in terms of my faith and my religion. There's a really nice line in the sand because there is a point that if you go beyond it, you lose that. And you don't just lose it a little bit, you lose it completely. You wake up the next morning and you just go, I didn't listen to what anybody else had to say. I was too busy saying what I wanted to say. I was making a fool of myself. I said some things I shouldn't have said. Or even worse, if you go way too far, which please don't do this, but I don't even remember what we talked about, right? Like we've all been there. It happens. We're human. We fail, right? Like it just happens. But that's a really, in a way, it's kind of beautiful to see that line in the sand and see if I'm staying below that line, this really cool thing happens where we're just having a couple of drinks. We're having a glass of whiskey. We're having a couple of beers. And everybody's guard is just a hair down. And sometimes it's not even down from anything that's chemically happening in your brain from the alcohol. It's happening from things that are chemically happening in your brain from the body language. Because we see that you're holding a beer. We see that you're sipping on it. We see that you're holding a glass of whiskey. We see that you're nosing it. And it just lets our guard down a little bit. It's like, okay, we're all on the same level doing the same thing right now. There is just something to that. I don't have any studies to back that one up, but I feel like if you're watching this, you know what I'm talking about. And so alcohol can be a great social lubricant, but as soon as you go across that line, you know it. You know it the next day. You go, I was not present. Last night, I looked forward to it all week, and then I had a couple too many, and now I didn't even enjoy it nearly as much as I wished I had. And I've had that. We've all had that. We've all been there. So it's a good social lubricant if it's in just the right amount, right? It's also a rich culture. Alcohol is such a rich culture. I already mentioned the culture of Ireland, absolutely. But even here in the U.S., first of all, bar culture can be great. Like some bars you go to and they're just depressing because it's just people there to get drunk basically. And that's not what I mean. I mean something that's closer to the Irish pub culture where you're there to talk and socialize and have fun. I've already talked about that, so I'm not going to beat that dead horse. But also, as a whiskey lover, the bourbon trail. I mean, the culture down there in Kentucky and at your local distilleries, at my local distilleries, the culture there is phenomenal. You talk to these people and they're masters of their craft and they love it and they love the history of it. I mean, the history of the United States is really the history of bourbon. They grew up together. They are very tightly close siblings. They are attached at the hip. And that culture is awesome. I challenge anybody, even if you don't like whiskey, to go take a tour, especially of one of the more historical distilleries, although small local micro distilleries are a ton of fun for their own reason. But for the purpose of American culture, go tour one of those older distilleries. Go tour a Maker's Mark, a Woodford Reserve, Buffalo Trace, Heaven Hill, Wild Turkey, any of those, and don't fall in love with the culture. I challenge you to do that because it's awesome. And there is a culture to it. And we shouldn't lose that culture. That is more baby being thrown out with bathwater right there, right? So if you don't know the metaphor, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, which my wife didn't used to until I said it, you're probably thinking, what is this dude talking about with babies and bathwater right now? I had to bring that up because it is a metaphor. It means to throw out the good with the bad. But I haven't. I know that some people don't use it as much anymore. It's not as common anymore. So anyhow, rich culture, another great reason, another good outcome of alcohol, in my personal opinion. And of course, it employs all these people. It's this huge industry of all these passionate people working in their craft, and that is beautiful as well. And it's also, speaking of beauty, an art form, right? Like, even when I'm doing a tasting using a spittoon, I am admiring the art that is whiskey, and I'm not actually quote unquote drinking. Now, I'm probably getting a tiny bit of alcohol through my mouth, through my salivary glands, through the tiny little bits that I accidentally swallow when I'm doing that. But for the most part, I'm not even drinking. Like, I'm probably drinking about the same as a non-alcoholic beer, right? And I'm still admiring this art form. I'm admiring this flavor and this taste and this thing that somebody crafted to take me through an experience. And that is a ton of fun as well. And that's another beautiful thing about whiskey specifically, and spirits especially. And I would say even craft beer. I would extend it to craft beer because I love craft beer. I would extend it to craft beer, craft wines, whiskeys, other spirits. There is something absolutely to that, and it is absolutely an art form. And so these are all good things. So to recap what I just mentioned, brings people together, social lubricant when used in the right dosage, rich culture, art form. All these things are, I think, positive things that come from alcohol, and they're reasons I don't want us to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Darn it, I used it again, and I was trying not to, actually, but it just kind of flowed out of my mouth. But these are all things that I really think we should have in mind. And interestingly enough, they're all things that are dose dependent because they all collapse when you drink too much and you don't admire these things for what they are. You don't bring people together because everybody's too drunk to even notice the other people around them. They're just living in their own little world. You don't have a social lubricant for basically that same reason. You don't have a rich culture because people aren't admiring the culture. People aren't thinking about the culture. They're just thinking about drinking. You don't have an art form because you're forgetting to even pay attention to what you're tasting because you drank too much. All of these things actually are dose dependent. They collapse when you drink too much. And that is so very important because just like any medicine you take, the right dosage matters. And I'm not saying alcohol is medicine. I'm just saying there are positive aspects of it that are dose dependent. So, let's talk a little bit about the statistics, right? That's enough of Chris's opinion, my philosophy, although I am going to then at the end summarize my philosophy and my takeaways from these things. But let's talk about statistics, right? So I wrote a couple of these down, and I apologize. I'm just going to have to read like directly off the computer because I can't memorize all these studies. But I found a study by Mish and colleagues, and I'm going to link this down in the show notes. And this is a study that shows the dangers of drinking and the problems with drinking. And it's not as much alcohol as you'd probably think it needs to be. So a lot of us probably grew up thinking if I'm not drinking every day, if I'm reserving it for weekends or maybe the occasional weeknight, but I'm mostly sober, I'm like full-time sober, part-time not sober, then I'm probably okay. That's kind of what I grew up thinking. But newer studies are showing that that's not the case. So as an example, this Mish study, I think it's Mish is probably how it's pronounced. Maybe it's Mish. I don't know. The risk of mortality increases with the amount of alcohol consumption. So just directly, as you consume more alcohol, the risk of mortality increases. And then the conclusion is, only by abstaining from alcohol can no additional risk be expected. So it's not like, well, as long as I'm drinking a handful a week, there's no extra risk. There's immediately more risk in doing that. So risks do increase no matter what. Full stop. Okay. Another finding from that same study, the risk remains low with 2 standard drinks per week. So there's already a risk, but it's at least low risk. And above 2 drinks per week, the risk increases to moderate. It remains moderate with 3 to 6 standard drinks per week, but there is no benefit with moderate consumption. This Oh, and then it says this is in fact a paradigm change, is what the study said. But anyhow, they find no benefit. Other studies that I'm going to talk about do find a benefit, so just keep that in mind. But the important thing is 2 drinks for low risk. After 2 drinks, you're moving into moderate risk per week, not per night. That is mind-blowing in my opinion. So that is something to keep in mind, right? We should, if we're going to be drinking, we should be drinking slowly. We shouldn't be drinking very much. We should be drinking lower alcohol content. And I actually, personally, I work in non-alcoholic beers for this reason. I love having a couple non-alcoholic beers to slow me down, allow me to always have a drink in my hand and always be enjoying the drink, but slow down the actual intake of alcohol. I think they're great for that. But anyhow, so there's risk immediately, and the risk grows immediately after 2 drinks, which is amazing, 2 drinks per week. Now, there are some statistics in favor of alcohol consumption, and in every case, I would say it's moderate. It's moderate or low even alcohol consumption. It's important to keep that in mind. So there's a study by Holohan and colleagues. I hope I pronounced that right. Once again, it'll be down below. This study found that out of older adults, people who abstained from alcohol their whole life had higher mortality risk than those who drank alcohol. So something this study found, like they didn't, I didn't look into causation or anything like that. The study found that if you abstain from alcohol in your later life, you tend to have higher mortality, which was very interesting. And then this other study that I'm using as kind of some context here, this was by Scott and colleagues, found that moderate alcohol consumption in later life was correlated to less depressive symptoms, specifically when social interaction is a result of the consumption. So when alcohol is helping you to be more social and be around people and get that social fill that we all actually need, whether we admit it or not, it actually helps you later in life to be less depressed. And I think this is one of the reasons that we see less mortality and we see those benefits. So in both of these studies, you can see that alcohol has a use, but under the umbrella of the first studies that I mentioned, which was it's bad if you go overboard. The more you drink, the worse it is for you, full stop. Okay, so just to throw a couple of studies out there, and once again, I'll put them down in the show notes. But I look at things like this, and I'm sure we've all seen the dozens of videos online that talk about studies like this, talk about similar studies, etc. And what do we do with that information? And so this is where I really get my philosophy on drinking alcohol. First of all, you can find something on the internet to support anything. If I wanted to find something on the internet to scare you into never drinking again, I probably could. If I wanted to find something on the internet to give you permission to drink as much as you possibly wanted, I probably could. You can find something to support anything these days because the internet and the way studies are done, it's so vast that you can find something, okay? So as with most things in life, my takeaway from that is that as with most things in life, balance is key, okay? Working out can be bad for you if it's all that you do and it ruins your social life and it strains your body and you're just like actually beating yourself up every day in the gym. It can be bad for you, right? But generally working out is good for you. I think alcohol is kind of the opposite, where it can be good for you in moderation. Generally speaking, the more, the worse. The more you drink, the worse it's going to be for you. But some amount of drinking can be good for you. And I think that is really important. And I also think fasting is a key to this moderation. Taking time off, taking a month off, doing dry January, doing sober October, doing a dry week, just sprinkling in a dry week and saying, I'm not going to drink at all this week or this weekend. And doing that maybe once a month or twice a month or whatever. That can help. And that can also help lower the amount that you're drinking. And then, of course, if you're building up, if you're like, well, I'm going to save up all my drinks and then go nuts at the end of the month, that's not good either. Okay, I didn't get any studies for that, but I think we all know that's the case, right? And as I mentioned, if you do that, you might be technically meeting the 2 drinks per week thing, but first of all, that's probably not what those studies mean. And second of all, you are going to lose all those benefits I talked about before, the bringing people together, the social lubricant, the rich culture, the art form. You're going to lose all those because you're going to be intoxicated. And so it's really important that it's not just like we find the loophole and we do this the way we want to do it. It's really important that we are honest with ourselves and aware of ourselves. And that is probably the most important thing, is to be aware of yourself and aware of your relationship to alcohol. And constantly asking yourself, do I have a healthy relationship with alcohol? And so that's kind of what I do. And what I do is I think I drink a smaller amount than your average person, and maybe more than I should, is kind of where I'm at. I think I probably drink more than 2 drinks per week, mainly when I'm doing reviews and things especially. But I probably average 2 to 3 drinks per week if I had to guess. I don't know, maybe more, maybe less. Definitely less some weeks where I just don't drink at all. And then definitely more some weeks where, maybe I'll have a drink on a weeknight and then I have friends over and next thing I know I've had 4 drinks this week. Something like that. I'm not a perfect person, and I'm not trying to be when I'm saying this, but I'm just trying to explain my takeaways from this. And then I think another important aspect of it, and another thing to have in mind, is to trust the people around you. And have people around you who are going to say, listen, dude, you're drinking too much, or I've noticed every time we hang out lately you're drinking, or something like that. Have people around you who are going to tell you that. And ask the people around you, hey, do you think I drink a lot? Do you think I drink more than you do? What do you think about my relationship to alcohol? Have people around you who can check you and who can say, yeah, dude, like this is becoming a problem, or no. And don't just pick somebody who's worse than you to be that person. That's not a loophole. That is just bad for you. If you're like, well, I know that so-and-so drinks a lot. He drinks every night. So if I ask him, he's going to be like, dude, you're good. Don't do that, okay? You have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with the people around you. And by the way, don't be afraid to be that person for the people around you. Especially as a Christian, we are called to be that person for the people around us, to let somebody know when they are failing, when they are doing something wrong, and to not be judgmental about it, to approach it with love and kindness and care, and to be very ready for our friends around us to say the same exact thing to us. But even if you're an atheist, that is an important aspect, especially of your relationship to drinking. Don't be afraid to tell the people around you, and don't be afraid to ask them, you tell me when I slip up too. That's really important. So that's kind of my overall philosophy on drinking, and I hope it wasn't too preachy of an episode, but I just think that there is this important thing that we're going to lose, and I already see it all around me, in the people around me, in other people who I just witness, and I'm not even really a part of the interactions, where we are losing this talking to each other and just sitting down at a bar and having 2 beers over the course of 3 hours and just talking. We're losing that. And so I don't think we should. I think we might lose something important when we lose something like that. So don't be afraid to have a couple drinks with your friends. Be responsible. Never drink and drive. Let's cap this off with my philosophy on drinking and driving. If I have more than 1 drink, and I'm not here to tell you how many you should have, by the way. There is no perfect amount because it depends on the person. But I don't drive almost ever when I drink. There's almost no safe number of drinks for me to drive. I don't. And you can ask anybody that knows me. I will have my wife drive, and we will take turns being DD. And for me, DD does not mean I'm getting drunk. It means I am drinking. And it could be 1 drink. It could be 2 drinks. It does not need to be a lot. So please don't drink and drive. There is, all these statistics are great. They all go out the window if you get in a car accident. And that's because just a little tiny bit of alcohol can lower your reaction time. So it might not be an accident that's your fault, but it might be that you didn't react to something quickly enough. In Ohio, it might be that a deer ran out in front of you, and because you were just too slow on your reaction time, you overcompensated and went into a tree. Something like that. Those are things people don't like to think about, but it's the truth. So I personally don't drink and drive, like at all. I mean, there are exceptions to the rule, but I know myself very well, and I am horribly honest with myself when it comes to that, which I think we all need to be. So be aware of yourself and find the healthy relationship. And none of this applies if you have an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. But my encouragement for everybody here is to invite some friends over and have real conversation. And even if it's just over dinner and it doesn't have anything to do with whiskey, have some nice conversation. Or use whiskey or use cocktails as a reason to bring your friends over and to have conversations. And don't overserve anybody or whatever, but just have a responsible drink and actually genuinely talk to each other. And if there's anything you take away from this episode, I hope that it's that, because I think we really need to get that culture moving again, even if it's just by food and not by alcohol, or if it's by alcohol for one person and by food for another, whatever. However, whatever method we use, we need that culture again. I think we can all see that it's dying. I don't think anybody here would deny that culture is going away, and that's not good. Excuse me. So that's my challenge for you this week. Invite some friends over. Have some conversations. Don't have something else to talk about. Don't invite friends over and then watch a movie and not talk, or watch a football game and not talk, or play a board game and not talk. Invite friends over and have real conversations with them. Okay. Soapbox over. If you liked this episode, please consider joining the Whiskey Noobs crew. I do put a link to it down in the description below. It's hosted on Patreon. We just added for Noobs and up, because there are tiers. Noobs, that's $5 a month, and up. We're going to be doing discounts at tours on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, and maybe even some tours in Ohio as well. I'm still reaching out to more distilleries. As of the recording of this episode, we have a discount code for Town Branch. That's Lexington Brewing and Distilling Company. There's a discount code for a tour there for 20% off. And I'm working on getting more of those for our members, so that when you go down to the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, you've got some places you can go that are even cheaper than the others. And usually tours are priced relatively well, but that can help. That adds up, especially if you're doing multiple tours while you're down there. So I'm working on getting more of them. I've got another distiller that's most likely going to do it, and I'm going to be adding that here in the next few days. And then I'm working on getting more distilleries, because I think that would be a ton of fun. Just another way I'm trying to bring value to you guys. We've, of course, got the barrel pick coming up. You got some behind the scenes or extra content, bonus podcast episodes, depending on what tier you're in, and, of course, merch as well. So please consider going and checking that out. Thank you guys all for your support. Thank you to the Whiskey Noobs crew. Thank you, even if you're not a part of the Whiskey Noobs crew, which, by the way, almost forgot. Join the free tier. It's free, and it'll keep you up to date on things, at least. But even if you're not a part of that, thank you for watching this show. Please subscribe, like this episode, comment on this episode, and ring that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and review it on whatever podcast streamer you're listening to if you're not on YouTube. Thank you guys all for listening. I think those are all the announcements. I hope so. I'll leave you with learn to drink, and drink responsibly to learn. Cheers.